But Japan's rural Mie prefecture is known as the birthplace of the country's famous cultured pearls. Thousands made their living by farming and selling the gems. But their fortunes are ebbing as climate change, technology, and an exodus of new blood worsen a decline that's already in place due to a graying workforce. CNA's Michio Ishida with a report.
For centuries, ama, or women-free divers, lived off the waters rich with marine life around Japan's Mie prefecture. But 69-year-old Kimio Hayashi could well be the last of her generation. For more than 4,000 ama in the 1970s, there are now only about 500 in Mie.
もうね、若い人がね入ってきても海女さんで生活できないんで今はもう海女を辞めて他の仕事についてる若い人たちが多いんですよ。
Miss Hayashi's equipment is minimal and almost primitive. A wetsuit, fins, and a diving belt made from rope and stones. The freezing temperature doesn't faze her as she begins her search for shellfish. It doesn't take long before she resurfaces, her harvest in hand. But gone are the days when she would swim back with a full basket.
昔と全然海の中が変わってきまして、地球温暖化で毎年海水温が高くなってきてるし、アワビとかサザエが食べる海藻類が生えなくなってきてる。餌がなくなってきてる。
Ama now mainly harvest shellfish for meat. But until the 1960s, they had an essential role in Mie's renowned pearl industry, diving to plant and retrieve pearl oysters. This changed as technology advanced, and now the industry itself is at risk, a victim of climate change, urbanization, and aging. Mie's Masaki Island is a hub for pearl cultivation. There used to be 1,000 people working in the industry, but today there are only 40, many of them elderly. As the number of pearl farmers declines, so too are related businesses with century-long histories. Kashikojima is an island in Mie known for its pearl jewelers. But many of the owners are getting on in years. As prospects dwindle, younger folks are moving to the big cities to find work.
業界もだんだんやっぱりこう人が少なくなってるのは少なくなってますかね。男の子は2人いるんですけど、今はそれぞれ別々の道を進んでるんで、まああともうちょっと自分が頑張って、その後に帰ってくるなりしたら、一生懸命じゃなくてもちょっとこう片手間にやってもらえてもいいかな。
Mr. Yoshimori says his children don't seem keen to take over the store, and he fears the third-generation family business could end with him. Michio Ishida, CNA, Shima, Mie Prefecture, Japan.
Well, East Asian societies, China, Japan, and South Korea are all facing unprecedented rapid aging, a result of life expectancies climbing and dwindling birth rates. The policymakers are trying to find solutions. There are simply no easy fixes. Michio Ishida, once again, tells us more.
Japan is home to the world's oldest population and has long grappled with demographic problems. More than 1 in 10 people are now aged 80 and older. People aged 65 and older make up nearly a third of the country's population. Japan has one of the world's highest life expectancies. Almost 1 in 1,500 Japanese are at least 100 years old, compared with roughly 1 in 5,000 people globally. But Japan's aging population is also due to its persistently low birth rate. A weakening currency, high cost of living, and tough working conditions are some of the many issues that are keeping Japanese from having children. The number of babies born in the country fell for an 8th straight year to a new low in 2023. South Korea also recently broke an unwanted record for the world's lowest fertility rate. The average number of expected births for a South Korean woman plunged to a historic low of 0.72 in 2023, far less than the 2.1 figure needed to maintain a stable population. That's despite the government pouring in billions of dollars in an effort to reverse this trend. It's been offering cash subsidies, babysitting services, even support for infertility treatment. South Koreans cite high child rearing costs, a patriarchal culture, the gender pay gap, and a highly competitive society for not wanting to start a family. The Chinese are also having fewer children, delaying childbirth, or not having kids at all. This despite the fact that Beijing ended its one-child policy in 2016. Last year, China's population shrank for the second time since 1961 due to record low birth rates and a wave of COVID-19 deaths. Delayed marriage, rising singlehood, and job uncertainties are some factors why the Chinese are avoiding having babies. The United Nations says by 2050, 1 in 3 people in Asia could be older than 65. The aging population could put a strain on public finances and healthcare delivery and make it harder for countries to sustain economic growth amid a shrinking workforce.
All right, so let's bring in CNA's Lim Yun-suk in Seoul and Victoria Jen in Taipei for more. So it is interesting to note that both Taiwan and South Korea, they share the same stats. And that's basically by next year, some 20% of the population will be aged 65 or older. Victoria, so Taipei, as a matter of fact, has now earned the title of the oldest city, boasting over, I think, 22% of its residents being elderly. So I was quite surprised when I saw the stats, because the concentration is in urban areas rather than in rural regions. So should we be taken aback by this shocking stats?
Well, it's actually quite understandable because for many elderlies, they find living in urban areas very convenient because there are more public transportation, such as buses and metro systems. And also there's more resources, like medical resources. We're talking about major hospitals and better equipment. And on top of that, there's also more people in the cities because that allows them to have a more active social life. And my mother, for example, she's 86 years old, and she prefers to live in Taipei because she is close to major hospitals. And on top of that, she gets to play mahjong with her friends every day, and that makes her very happy.
That's right. As you get older, you start thinking, where are the major hospitals around you? Yun-suk, now, South Korea has got sort of a double whammy problem. You're facing the world's lowest birth rate, and projections are suggesting that by 2050, nearly 44% of the population could be 65 years and older. So how exactly is the country strategizing in terms of trying to untap the potential of its aging population as a means to drive economic growth?
Well, not much is really being done. I mean, the South Korean government realizes this, and according to several statistics, the economic growth could fall to 0.5% in 2050. And so this is an urgent issue that the government needs to tackle. But right now, there doesn't seem to be a government policy or scheme to tackle this. There are some regions who have taken efforts on their own, like in the southern port city of Busan, where the city is now helping the elderly find jobs in places like cafes and bakeries. And these are the people who have no jobs, after retirement. But overall, it is a big problem, and especially since nearly half of the elderly population live in poverty here. Now, there are some experts even saying that the South Korean government should abolish this retirement age, which is 60 right now, because with the country also having one of the world's lowest birth rate, it needs to make use of every capable person out there, if possible, and not be fixed on that retirement age.
Yeah, and speaking of birth rates, some other countries in the West, though, they've managed to reverse the trend. So take Hungary, for example. They've seen its birth rate rise from 1.6 to 1.8. And the Central European country of 9.6 million spends some 5% of its national GDP trying to boost its population. And Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó spoke to CNA about this. Let's listen in.
we're going to continue supporting our families, because you have two options: either migration, which we totally oppose, or to help your families. Because what we wanted to create is that the decision whether to have a kid must not be of economic nature. So having a kid must not put you in a less advantageous position than not having a kid. That's why we have free schooling, free books, free meal, lifetime tax exemption for ladies having 4 or more kids, and so on and so forth. Support for buying cars, support for buying your home, and all these kind of measures.
So we've heard there, Hungary has gone to pretty extreme lengths to boost its population rate. Victoria, despite Taiwan's declining birth rate, one area seems to be defying that trend, though, and that's called the Hsinchu Science Park. What sets this location apart from the rest?
Well, the science park is where all the high technology companies are located, such as TSMC, and the employees there, they're making an average of about $120,000 a year, and that is 5 times higher than the ordinary Taiwanese. So since they make much more money, so they can have the luxury to buy homes and also to get married and have children. At the same time, of course, the technology companies, they are very generous in encouraging their staff to have more children by giving out baby bonuses and also extended maternity leaves.
Yeah, so perhaps, and Victoria, I guess
and Young-suk.
Go ahead, Victoria.
And Young-suk, I have a question for you. Yes, Young-suk, I'd like to ask you, you mentioned earlier that the elderlies, they are living, nearly half of them are living in poverty. Why is that exactly?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint one reason, but, the retirement age here in South Korea is 60. But people are living longer these days. And so, for example, someone who's 65 and even 70 are not considered elderly by many people here because there's just so many people older than them. And these people simply have not saved enough to last them all those years and decades after retirement. Now, remember, South Korea fought a war with North Korea until 1953. In the 1960s, these are the people who worked hard, made South Korea what it is today, but they didn't think about saving for themselves. And even the generation after that, those who were born in the 1960s, they worked hard, but a lot of their money was spent on their children, on the children's education, and not saving for themselves then too. So now they're old with no savings, and unlike in the past, South Korean children these days are less willing to take care of their elderly parents, and so many just end up poor, lonely, with nowhere to go.
And Victoria, I'm wondering, based on what Yoon-suk was saying, if that's perhaps, why people don't want children. One interesting article I read is that people in Taiwan would rather raise pets than children as the population declines. How true is that?
That's right. The number of registered pets actually exceeded the number of newborns by 100,000 last year. That's a significant number. And the main reason is because that they are cheaper to raise and also easier to take care of. And of course, also the fact that the responsibility in taking care of a cat and the dogs is definitely much less than raising a child, because the lifespan for the pets is about 15 to 20 years. But the responsibility in raising a child is for a whole lifetime. So that explains why a lot of young Taiwanese, they rather have pets than children.
Yeah, if you do the math, I do see where you're coming from. Thanks so very much. CNA's Victoria Jen in Taipei and Lim Yoon-suk in Seoul.